A voting rights bill might survive Congress after all, perhaps in a different form than it's in now. Yesterday, President Biden and Vice President Harris met with the top congressional Democrats at the White House. They're finalizing a scaled-back voting rights bill for the Senate to vote on before going on recess. One of the most critically important parts of the bill would end partisan gerrymandering. Why is that so important? Well, a new analysis shows that Republicans could retake the House in 2022 just with their control of redistricting in just 4 southern states. That is according to the Democratic firm Target Smart, as first reported by Mother Jones. The Republican-controlled legislature in North Carolina could draw 1 or 2 new GOP-controlled districts. In Texas and Georgia, it could be up to 3 each. In Florida, it could be as many as 5. According to the Cook Political Report, when redistricting begins, Republicans will be in charge of redrawing congressional lines for 187 districts. Democrats will control 75 districts. Joining us now is Charlie Cook. He's an MSNBC Special Units political contributor, as well as the founder of and contributor for the Cook Political Report. Mr. Cook, good to see you this evening. Welcome.
Thanks for having me on, Joshua.
I wonder what your thought is on this. Before you respond, here's a quick clip of Congressman Ronnie Jackson from Texas speaking at an event for the Faith and Freedom Coalition last month. Listen.
We're 4 votes right now from controlling what happens on the floor, right? We have everything working in our favor right now. We have redistricting coming up, and the Republicans control most of that process in most of the states around the country. That alone should get us the majority back.
What do you make of that?
Well, it's 5 votes. But anyway, the thing is, when you've got the Mother Jones piece is absolutely right. Redistricting could cost Democrats the 5 seats that Republicans need to get a majority. Absolutely. But when you've got a majority that's that small, anything going wrong. I mean, yes, redistricting, but just the reapportionment process, where they reallocate states at the end of each decade, 7 House seats are going to be switching states and mostly going from blue Democratic states to red Republican states. That could be 3 out of the 5 that Republicans need just right there. So you've got redistricting is a problem. You've got reapportionment's a problem. And then you've got just sort of the historic average that only 3 out of 39 midterm elections since the Civil War, the party in the White House has actually gained seats. So Democrats there's a lot that can go wrong, and they need everything to go right for them to hang on to a majority this small.
What about the impact of, voters? What's it look like in terms of the actual leanings for the election? Like, are there districts that you're following that look like they're leaning more to toss-ups when they were more solid, or that might be leaning kind of away from one party or another? How does that look, just taking redistricting out of it for a second?
Yeah, well, the thing is, because 43 states are going to crack their maps open, we don't know what the districts are going to look like. So there's that. But there's always going to be 30, 40, 50, whatever House seats that are going to be really, really close. And we have a general idea of what it's going to be, but we won't really know for sure in each state until the maps are drawn. But this is a very challenging situation. I mean, to give you an idea, the Democratic majority in the House basically was determined by fewer than 32,000 votes in a half dozen districts. 32,000. That's like the population of Walla Walla, Washington. That's that's such a narrow majority that Democrats need everything to go right. And, the good news for Democrats is President Biden is not unpopular, and he's certainly a lot better off than where President Trump was at this point. But at the same time, voters have a tendency, one of the things that happens these midterm elections is that unfortunately love and gratitude are not the dominant motivations for voters in midterm elections.
Right.
It's anger and fear. And generally, it's the losing side from the previous election. Their voters are more motivated. So that's the challenge that Democrats have in this election.
I wonder what your sense is of how some of the voting restrictions that states have passed factor into this. We spoke to Gabriel Sterling, who's one of the top elections officials in Georgia, a few months ago over on Peacock. And I asked him very categorically on the record if he actually believed that the guardrails of government would prevent those new laws in Georgia from being used to partisan aims. Here is what he told me then.
I think it would be extremely difficult and unlikely. And if somebody tried it, I got a feeling that Joshua, you and every other journalist in the country would say, what the heck are you doing? And the thing is, it's a long process. There's a lot of due process involved. It's not like a snap thing that can just happen. But we have years of counties in this state that have made mistakes and really damaged their voters' abilities to vote.
How do you see that now?
Well, I had heard Democrats talk about voter suppression for decades. And until about 2011, 12, 13, I frankly think it was exaggerated. But we have seen over the last, say, 6-7 years, state legislatures and governors putting in completely arbitrary changes that have made it very difficult for certain kinds of people to vote. And, at first, it might seem coincidental, but after a while, a pattern appears and is obvious. And, it's pretty clear now whether they'll succeed or not. But again, the margin that Democrats have is so narrow that little bitty things can make all the difference in the world. So I think Democrats are very, they're not paranoid to think that there are state legislatures that are out to try to cost them their majority. There's no question in my mind about that.
Charlie Cook, always good to have you on with us. Thanks very much.
Redistricting is how states change the boundaries of areas that vote for each of their congressional seats in the House of Representatives. In some states, the process is done by a bipartisan committee to make sure that each slice has an even number of pepper voters and pineapple voters. But in 36 states, the process is done by whichever party is in charge. This means you could wind up with 3 slices that are majority green pepper. It's not exactly fair to the pineapple. For instance, in North Carolina, there was a district that used to be 60% onion voters and 40% tomato. But when the tomatoes were in charge of the whole state, they resliced the district so it was only 45% onion, and the long-serving onion congressman lost his job. In an Illinois district, there was a part of Chicago that was primarily Hawaiian pizzas sandwiched between a bunch of spinach neighborhoods. A fair weight of slice of pizza would have had the Hawaiian slices distributed evenly with their neighbor. But Illinois did it a little different. These partisan pizza redistricting practices could be an explanation of why, in a country where 50% of voters went for cheese representatives and 50% went for pepperoni, the pepperoni could have more slices of the pie.